Hello, I'm Laura from Wood Street Assembly of God Church, and I just want to talk to you today about a few things that I struggle with sometimes, and I know that if I do, surely there are other people who deal with the same thing. And when I think about life and different things that stress me out or make me really anxious, um, there is one common thread, and that is my response to these situations a lot of time comes from my desire to be in control. And I know most people always want to be in control of their situations, even though that's not always possible. And we have to learn to trust that God is the one in control. And I can tell you this just from experience that trust and control cannot coexist. And either you can have control over the things in your life or God can have control, and you can trust that He does. This presents quite a challenge with when you consider that throughout the Scripture, God instructs us to trust Him and trust His leading in our circumstances. In fact, we see God's guidance. It doesn't really include the full picture. It doesn't include the destination, and sometimes it doesn't always include the details in between. And Scripture tells us that, God desires our trust in Him and to trust Him along the way. If you read in Genesis about Abraham, God tells him to leave the country and go to a destination that he knows nothing about. In Genesis, I want to read to you chapter 12, verse 1. The Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's house to the land that I will show you." Now, that has to be one of the most difficult things that I can think of, because God basically told Abraham, pack your bags and take off. He didn't tell him anything else. Can you imagine me coming up to you saying, okay, pack your bags, you're heading out? You would want to know where you're going, how you're going to get there, and the things that you may run into along the way. But God didn't give Abraham those details. He just told him to go. If God had given him the details, he might have said, okay, God, now maybe we can go somewhere else, or maybe this is how I need to get there instead of what you said, or maybe we need to change up some of the details along the journey. But you have to trust God. Abraham trusted God, and with that trust, he just took off. And with us, with our desire to be in control, that would be extremely difficult. I know that it would be for me. And also, Mary and Martha, Lazarus' sisters. Now, after Lazarus had died and Jesus showed up on the scene, He told them to roll away the stone from the grave. Well, Martha was pretty much mortified about that, because she told Jesus, hey, wait a minute. He's been dead 4 days. He's going to stink. But she didn't understand what the outcome of that would be. She had to trust that Jesus knew what He was talking about. But she wanted to be in control. She wanted to tell Jesus what He needed to do and how He needed to do it. But Jesus was just like, trust me, I've got this. So when the stone was rolled away and He called Lazarus out, he was alive, and now his sisters had their brother back. It was all about trusting that Jesus knew what He was doing, and we just had to take our hands off the situation. So, how much of your stressing and worrying is attempt of, you're trying to be in control of your situations? maybe we need to just take our hands off and let God do what He needs to do in our lives. I know many times we'll go to the altar and we'll pray and we'll say, okay, God, this is yours. I can't handle this. I don't know what else to do. Please take over my situation. But as soon as we get through praying, we'll get up from the altar and we'll take it back because we want to tell God how He needs to handle the situation, when that's really not our place. There's a lot of us that really, really want to be in control because that's our safe spot. It's not necessarily that we don't trust God. We just want to be a part of making sure things turn out the way we want them to. Now, one thing I think that will help us is to just acknowledge our struggle to God. He already knows we struggle. He knows what we're thinking before we even say it out loud. And just tell Him, okay, God, we want to trust You. We're struggling, but we want to trust You. Just help me. Help me with my unbelief. And then another thing is to stop our negative thoughts. And sometimes that's really difficult to do as well. But as soon as we start having those negative thoughts, as soon as we start becoming really anxious or worrying about what's going on around us, then we need to start focusing on Jesus, who He is, what He's done for us, maybe quoting some scripture, because I can tell you that two separate thoughts cannot be going on simultaneously in your mind. It's one or the other. So if we stop those negative thoughts, focus on God, then that's going to help us decrease that anxiety and that worry, because we do feel out of control so many times. I know the Apostle Paul, he said that we need to take our thoughts captive. So that's the same thing. And I want to read to you 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5. And it says that we demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. We take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. So here Paul is talking about taking our thoughts captive. We can't be sinking in our worry, anxiety, our negative thoughts, and trusting God and thinking about His glory and how He is in control of our situations. We can't do that all at the same time. So, ironically, to trust God is one of the first steps in releasing our control of our thought lives and or releasing control of our life and gaining control of our thought life. We've got to gain control of our thoughts and release everything else to Christ and let Him be in control. Trust that He is the one that knows what He's doing and that He will be the one to lead us and guide us in the direction that we need to go. And then and only then will we have peace in our hearts and in our minds over the situations that we're in. Thank you.